Good morning, Bird Brains. Today we are going to be riding this 2015 Harley Davidson Road Glide. Just a quick overview of the bike, just to tell you kind of what it has. Stock motor, I believe this is stock exhaust. He does have progressive, I believe 13.5-inch shocks in the rear, so that's upgraded. Of course, the bars, grips, he's got LEDs in the front. He's got the dual day makers. Actually, those aren't day makers. I believe they're just HIDs in the front. Crash bar, and I think that's it. Other than that, it's pretty much stock seats, stock floorboards. So yeah, let's go ahead and hop on this thing. Alright, so before we get too much into the bike, I just want to tell you guys a little bit about myself if you're not regulars of the channel. I have been riding pretty much my entire life. I've ridden everything from dirt bikes to sport bikes to 1000cc naked bikes to Harleys to Sportsters, Dynas. Pretty much, I have a good repertoire of bikes under my belt. And I believe in giving the most fair and unbiased reviews out there. Now, of course, I've only been riding this bike for about 200 miles right now, so this isn't going to be a long, extensive, full top-down review. More of just the first impressions, the big things that stick out to you right off the bat. So like I mentioned earlier, this is a 2015 Harley Davidson Road Glide. I just looked up the MSRP on these things, and it's $20,899, which is funny because I didn't look that up until just now, literally right before I turned on the camera. I do that on purpose because I want to kind of give the bike a value prior to looking at how much it actually costs. And when I did that, I thought this bike would be worth about $21,000. So I was pretty damn spot on. And that means that that is money that I would be willing to pay for this bike if I was to purchase one myself. So first off, just some specs about the bike. Like I said, 2015 Road Glide. It has the 103 motor, which equates to 1,690 cc's, I believe. At least that's what it is on the Dynas. I'm sure it's configured the same for this bike. 6-speed transmission, air-cooled, of course. One thing I did notice right off the bat that's different from the Dyna with the same motor configuration is that this bike has a hydraulic clutch. That's why you see these reservoirs on both sides, one for the brake, one for the clutch. That's a little different for me because it holds the same pressure all the way through the lever pull, which if you're used to a cable, you kind of get heavier on the beginning or the end. I don't know the exact weight on this bike. My buddy told me, he said I believe it was around 900. So it's a little bit on the heavy side, but I'll get a little bit more into that later. Power wise, it's got plenty of power pretty much all throughout the gears. It does have this forward display, which I was playing around with a little bit last night. You can kind of swap through the different radio stations. You can turn up the volume, turn down the volume. I haven't played with it too much because I feel like it's a big distraction when you're riding and you're not comfortable with the bike. So I'm going to start off with kind of some things that, one, that I noticed that could be changed out, and two, some things that my buddy mentioned that he dislikes. Like I said, I only have a couple hundred miles. He has just under 10,000 on this bike. So of course, first off, he hated the handlebars, which I saw the stock bars and I could see why. I don't understand why Harley and other manufacturers think that people want their wrists turned in at an angle. I don't understand that. That is not how your wrists sit. These have a little bit of pullback to them, a little bit of angle, but these bars that he put on them, I believe they're built well. I could be wrong. I'll get him to confirm that. But they're about the same height, I believe, but just less pullback on the wrist, and they're very comfortable. After that, the biggest complaint he had was the rear shocks, hence why he swapped them out for progressives. They come stock with adjustable air shocks. He actually gave me his old shocks to put on my Sportster, and I love them on the Sportster, but I could see how they would be a little bit lackluster for a bike this heavy. But I believe he went with progressive 13.5s, so it raised the rear an inch, and they are very nice. I will say this bike kind of rides like you're on a spaceship now. I mean, it's just like you're on a cloud. Handles everything very well. The next thing that he mentioned that I have to disagree with is the seat. Now, of course, everyone knows that Harley is known for having crappy seats. I will say though, this is probably the most comfortable Harley seat that I've ever sat on. You got bike life over there? But my buddy is a little bit bigger of a guy. I am 6'2", 270 pounds. He's much bigger than I am. He's just a big ass dude, and he complained about the seat. Now, like I said, I haven't really taken this thing out for a super long ride, so I totally believe him, because a seat can turn from great to shitty real quick on a longer ride. I think the longest I've ridden this thing is about 30 miles. I should probably break that today during this, but even now I've been riding it for probably 25 miles, I would estimate, and I still have zero pain in my bum. So maybe for some bigger dudes that a seat would be necessary. For me, it would be far down the list of things to replace, honestly. So now getting into just things that I've noticed that I would change out. First things first is this windscreen. I don't know if this is stock. I'll have to ask him, but the way it sits right now, I would either have to get a shorter one or a taller one, because right now, I wonder if you guys can hear it. Right now I have my face shield down. If I lift it up, that wind is hitting me directly in the nose and eyes area. So if you're a type of person who doesn't like to wear full faces, or likes to ride with your visor open like I do, it might have to be swapped out. But that's only going to be for, you know, people of certain height. If I was any taller or any shorter, that wouldn't be an issue. Next thing on my personal list is the shifter. I'm not 100% certain how well this could be adjusted. If it could be adjusted, that'd be great, because right now the shifter knob sits about, I'd say, probably 2.5 inches above where my foot rests on these footboards here. So that means I have to lift up my foot quite a ways to hit that shift lever. And the same thing on the brake. I mean, if you look, that is not a comfortable position for my foot to be in. So I would come down on both sides. Like I said, I don't know how much those can be adjusted, if any at all. If not, I'd have to have some sort of modification done to them to get that swapped out. This bike does come equipped with a heel shifter, which is a first for me. I've ridden other bikes with heel shifters, never owned any. But I hated it at first, but now that I've ridden around a little bit, I don't hate it. It actually allows me to kind of get over that shifter not being so high, because to shift up, instead of lifting up with my toe, I can just click down with my heel like that. But I've heard other people say that they really dislike that, primarily due to the fact that it allows you to be a lazy rider. I don't have too many opinions on that, to be honest. And that is pretty much like the extent of things that I have noticed that I hate so far. Pretty short list, honestly. I mean, just little tidbit things here and there. Of course, the handlebars were a big one, but thankfully this bike already has the handlebars swapped out. But I would definitely be doing that if this was my bike and I bought it stock. So moving on to some things that I personally really like about this bike. First off is just the way it rides. Like I said, that might be partially due to the upgraded shocks in the rear, but just the combination of the weight, the power, the suspension, it's a very well balanced bike. Especially for it being 900 pounds, this thing is pretty dang nimble. Also, the brakes are fantastic. They have a dual disc up front. I'm not sure what they have in the rear, but they have the dual disc up front, and this thing can stop, man. I was riding it over to my buddy's house the other day, and I had a car pull out in front of me. I was going about 45, and a car pulled out about right there from that entrance, and I was able to stop without really any, you know, big pucker factor. So +1 to the brakes, man. I was incredibly impressed by how well they stopped. And of course, I couldn't go over the things that I like about this bike and not mention the looks. I believe that the Harley Davidson Road Glide is the best looking bagger on the market right now. Probably the only bagger that I would ever even consider buying. So like I mentioned earlier, I've ridden the Road King, I have ridden the Street Glide, I've ridden the Ultra Classic, and I have to say, out of those three, or these four, this bike is by far superior to those other three, in my personal opinion. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar about the differences between those bikes I just mentioned, I'll go ahead and throw some pictures up of what they look like and kind of point out some differences. Between the Road Glide and the Street Glide, you can see that the Road Glide has a fixed fairing. So this big fairing that you're seeing up front, all that is mounted to the frame. So if you notice, as I turn my handlebars, the fairing doesn't move. The fairing is fixed to the frame. On the street glides and the ultra classics and pretty much any other bike, the fairing is fixed to those front forks. So as you turn your handlebars, all that weight hanging off the front of your forks is pulling back on your handlebars. I will say that is the #1 reason why I hated riding the ultra classic, is just because it felt so incredibly heavy. With this bike having the fixed fairing, all your weight stays centered and all your weight stays off of your handlebars. So it's a lot easier to stand the bike up, and when you come to stoplights, putting your feet down and things like that. I felt much more comfortable on this bike than I did on the ultra classics. Going back to some things that I don't like, if you listen here, that transmission clunk is pretty damn loud. Now, I don't know if that's something that you can fix with some maintenance or some aftermarket parts or what have you, but that clunk, it just doesn't sound good. I don't like it. Man, this thing just turns. Well guys, that's pretty much all I have to say for this bike. I'll end it on what I was saying at the very beginning, is this bike is brand new, about $21,000, and that's exactly what I think it is worth. If you can find one used for a little bit cheaper than that, more power to you. If you're looking for a bike that you can put some miles on, this is a great choice, and I would love to personally have one myself. When I finally pull the trigger on a bagger, it's going to be a road glide, hands down, for sure. Lock it in. Unless maybe I ride something better between now and then, who knows. Well, that's going to do it for today's episode, guys. If you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. If you haven't already, go ahead and punch that subscribe button. And as always, thank you for watching. I'll see you guys next time.